The strangest thing I ever found in my boss's private suite was not hidden in a drawer or locked inside a safe. It was me. My name is Olivia Parker, and 3 months ago, I fell asleep in the one place I was never supposed to be. By the time I opened my eyes, everything in my life had changed. The digital clock on my computer read 11:47 p.m. Most of the lights on the executive floor had already shut off. Outside the towering glass windows, Manhattan shimmered beneath a cold spring rain. Thousands of tiny lights stretched into the darkness like distant stars. I rubbed my eyes and stared at the spreadsheet on my screen. The numbers blurred together. I had been awake since 5 that morning. My second job had ended at 7. Then I rushed straight to Blackwood International for another 6 hours of work. My head pounded. My shoulders ached. Even breathing felt exhausting. Across the office, every desk sat empty. The cleaning crew had already finished their rounds. Somewhere far below, a security cart rolled through the lobby. The sound echoed faintly through the building. I glanced at my phone. No new messages. No missed calls. Relief washed through me. Every night I worried about the same thing. My younger brother, Noah, 14 years old, recovering from a serious medical condition. Every hour without a phone call felt like a gift. I packed my bag and stood. The room tilted slightly. I grabbed the edge of my desk until the dizziness passed. 4 hours of sleep. Maybe 3. I could not remember anymore. The executive elevator opened with a soft chime. I stepped inside and pressed the penthouse level. The company maintained a private executive suite for overnight meetings and emergency business trips. Employees were never supposed to use it. Ever. But a week earlier, during a late-night project, I had discovered something important. The small sitting room attached to the suite was almost always empty. Quiet. Warm. Safe. Just 10 minutes there sometimes felt like an entire night of rest. Tonight, I only wanted to sit down for a moment before catching the last train home. Just 10 minutes. That was all. The suite was dark when I entered. City lights spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Expensive furniture cast long shadows across the room. Everything looked untouched. Perfect. Like a luxury hotel preserved inside a skyscraper. I placed my bag beside the sofa and sat down carefully. The cushions felt impossibly soft. For the first time all day, silence surrounded me. No ringing phones. No emails. No hospital bills waiting on my kitchen table. Just silence. I closed my eyes for a second. Only a second. At least that was what I intended. The next thing I remember was a deep voice cutting through the darkness. "Who are you?" My eyes snapped open. A tall man stood near the doorway, rain still clinging to his black coat. Gray eyes. Dark hair. Absolute disbelief written across his face. Ethan Blackwood had just found an employee sleeping inside his private suite. For a few seconds neither of us moved. The city lights reflected across the glass walls behind him, turning the room into a maze of shadows and silver. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I could hear it. Of all the people who could have walked through that door, it had to be Ethan Blackwood, founder, chief executive officer, the man whose name sat at the top of every company email, the man employees spoke about in lowered voices whenever he passed through the building. I scrambled upright so quickly that my bag fell from the sofa and hit the floor with a loud thud. "I am so sorry," I blurted out. I did not mean to fall asleep. I was leaving. I was about to leave. Ethan looked from me to the sofa and back again. His expression remained unreadable. Rainwater still glistened on the shoulders of his black coat. "You work here?" he asked. I nodded immediately. "Olivia Parker. Accounting department." His gaze lingered for a moment as if searching his memory. Then he stepped farther into the room. The door clicked shut behind him. The sound seemed unusually loud. Accounting does not normally conduct business in my private suite at midnight. Heat rushed into my face. "I know." The answer came out barely above a whisper. Embarrassment settled over me like a heavy blanket. Months of hard work. Years of trying to prove myself. And now my boss had found me asleep on his couch like a careless teenager. Ethan glanced toward the coffee table. My notebook lay open where I had left it. Pages filled with calculations, handwritten reminders, and crossed-out expenses covered the paper. He picked it up. Panic immediately tightened my chest. "Those are private." The words escaped before I could stop them. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Not offended, just surprised. Slowly, he handed the notebook back. "Then keep better track of private things." I quickly slipped it into my bag. The room fell silent again. I wished he would yell. I wished he would tell me I was fired. Anything would have been easier than the calm disappointment I imagined hiding behind his expression. Then his eyes drifted toward the sofa cushion. Something changed. He walked closer and looked down. My stomach dropped. A small damp stain remained on the fabric. Tears. I had not even realized I had fallen asleep crying. Ethan stared at it for a second before looking back at me. You were upset. It was not a question. I immediately looked away. I am fine. No. His voice remained calm. You are exhausted. The honesty of the statement hit harder than criticism would have. I opened my mouth to argue. Before I could speak, my phone suddenly rang. The sharp sound shattered the silence. My entire body froze. Only one person ever called me after midnight. Noah, my younger brother. Fear surged through me so fast it stole my breath. Ethan noticed instantly. I snatched the phone from my bag. The screen glowed in my trembling hand. And the moment I saw the hospital number, the room seemed to tilt beneath my feet. My fingers shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. Every terrible possibility rushed through my mind at once. Noah had been doing better. The doctors said he was getting stronger. He was supposed to be sleeping in his hospital room right now, not calling me through the main hospital number after midnight. Hello. My voice cracked. A nurse answered. Relief and panic collided inside my chest. Miss Parker, please do not worry. Noah is stable. Stable. The word loosened something tight inside me. I closed my eyes. What happened? He woke up asking for you. The nurse's tone softened. He had a difficult evening and became anxious. We thought hearing your voice might help. I turned away from Ethan and pressed a hand against my forehead. For a moment, all I could see was my little brother at age 8, running through a sprinkler in our backyard before life became complicated. Before hospitals. Before bills. Before every decision carried a price tag. Can I speak with him? A few seconds later, Noah came on the line. Liv. His voice sounded sleepy. Hey, troublemaker. I smiled despite the tears threatening to return. Why are you awake? Could not sleep. That makes two of us. A small laugh came through the speaker. Hearing it felt like sunlight after weeks of rain. We talked for several minutes. About school. About a science project he wanted to finish. About a video game he insisted he would beat once he got home. By the time the call ended, my heartbeat had finally slowed. Then I remembered I was not alone. Ethan still stood a few feet away. I slipped the phone into my bag and wiped quickly beneath my eyes. Your brother? He asked. I nodded. Yes. He studied me quietly. Is he sick? The question should have annoyed me. My personal life was none of his business. Yet there was no judgment in his voice. Only curiosity. Genuine curiosity. Recovering, I said carefully. He has been in and out of the hospital for months. Ethan glanced toward the city lights beyond the windows. And you are paying for it. I froze. The certainty in his voice caught me off guard. How did you know? He looked toward the notebook sticking out of my bag. Suddenly, I remembered the pages filled with calculations. Budget estimates. Payment plans. Lists of medical expenses I had tried unsuccessfully to organize. Heat rushed into my face. I was not reading your private information, he said. I only saw enough to understand why you are working yourself into the ground. The room fell silent again. I wanted to argue. I wanted to insist everything was under control. But the words would not come. Because nothing was under control. Not my finances. Not my exhaustion. Not my future. Ethan removed his coat and draped it over a nearby chair. Then he surprised me. Instead of ordering me to leave, he walked toward a cabinet built into the wall and returned with a bottle of water. He handed it to me. Sit down before you fall down. I stared at him. I thought you were going to fire me. For the first time that night, something almost resembling amusement crossed his face. Miss Parker, he said calmly, right now I am far more concerned that you look like you might collapse before reaching the elevator. For several seconds I simply stared at him. Nobody had asked whether I was okay in a very long time. People asked about deadlines, reports, payments, responsibilities. But not me. Not the person carrying all of it. I sat down slowly, more because my legs felt weak than because he told me to. The bottle of water felt cold against my hands. Ethan returned to the chair across from me. Rain continued sliding down the windows behind him. The city beyond the glass looked distant and unreal. How old is your brother? He asked. 14. His gaze remained steady. And your parents? I looked down at the water bottle. The answer never became easier. Gone. Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable. Just heavy. The kind of silence that appears when no explanation is needed. Ethan nodded once. So it is just the two of you? Yes. My voice came out softer than intended. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then my phone buzzed again with a text message. I glanced at the screen. Another payment reminder. Another medical invoice. Another deadline I could not afford to miss. I quickly locked the phone and slipped it away. Too late. Ethan had already noticed. How many jobs are you working? I laughed quietly. It sounded exhausted even to me. 2. And school. My eyes widened. How did you know about that? He pointed toward a folder sticking out of my bag. I followed his gaze. A university logo was printed across the cover. Great. Apparently, every secret I owned had decided to reveal itself tonight. Night classes, I admitted. Ethan leaned back slightly. Accounting department during the day. Second job at night. School. Hospital visits. He shook his head once. That schedule is impossible. Apparently not. The words escaped before I could stop them. His expression changed slightly. Not offended. Thoughtful. No, he said quietly. It is possible. That is the problem. Something about the way he said it caught me off guard. Most people admired overwork. They called it dedication, determination, success. Ethan sounded almost concerned. My gaze drifted toward the floor. Noah wants to study engineering someday. A smile appeared despite my exhaustion. He has plans for everything. Ethan listened. Really listened. Then he is fortunate to have you. The simple statement hit harder than I expected. I felt my throat tighten immediately. I looked away before he could notice. The room suddenly felt too quiet, too honest. Then Ethan stood and walked toward the coffee table where my bag sat. You dropped something earlier. He picked up a folded piece of paper that had slipped from one of the side pockets. My heart stopped. Hospital paperwork. Before I could reach him, the page unfolded slightly in his hand. I saw the numbers. The treatment costs. The balance due. The amount was large enough to make most people uncomfortable. Ethan stared at the page for several seconds. Then he slowly looked up at me. The expression on his face was not pity. Somehow that made it worse. Because for the first time all night, I realized he finally understood exactly how much I had been carrying alone. The number on the hospital statement looked unreal under the soft light of the suite. I hated that Ethan had seen it. Not because it was private, because it made everything impossible to hide. The overdue balance sat there in black ink, exposing every extra shift, every missed meal, every night I had spent wondering which bill could wait another month. Ethan folded the paper carefully and placed it on the table between us. He did not comment on the amount. He did not offer advice. Somehow that made the moment feel even heavier. How long has this been going on? He asked quietly. I stared at the floor. Almost 2 years. The words sounded smaller than they should have. 2 years of hospitals. 2 years of insurance disputes. 2 years of pretending I was fine, while everything slowly became harder. Ethan leaned forward slightly. And nobody at work knows? I shook my head. It is not their problem. You make it sound like asking for help is a crime. I laughed softly. No, it just feels expensive. His expression changed. For a second, I thought he understood exactly what I meant. Help always came with conditions. Expectations. Debts that could never be repaid. That had been my experience, at least. Outside the windows, the rain finally began to ease. Tiny droplets still traced paths down the glass, but the storm was fading. Midnight had slipped into early morning. Somewhere below us, New York continued moving without pause. I checked the time and immediately stood. I should go. Ethan looked surprised. Now, my train leaves in 20 minutes. And if you miss it? I forced a smile. Then I take the next one. He glanced toward the dark circles beneath my eyes. And get home at what time? I pretended not to hear the concern hidden in the question. Gathering my things felt strangely difficult. My body wanted sleep more than anything. Every muscle ached. Every movement felt heavier than it should have. When I lifted my bag, Ethan noticed the frayed strap immediately. When I slipped on my coat, he noticed the worn cuffs. It suddenly felt as if he was seeing details nobody else ever bothered to see. That realization made me uncomfortable. Miss Parker. I paused near the door. Yes. He stood and crossed the room. For a moment I expected another question. Instead, he handed me a business card. The thick white cardstock looked impossibly expensive. What is this? My direct number. I blinked. Why would I need your direct number? Ethan's answer came without hesitation. Because if your brother ends up in the hospital again at 3 in the morning, the last thing you should be worrying about is an accounting deadline. I stared at him. Surely he did not mean that. People like Ethan Blackwood did not hand out personal numbers to junior employees. They certainly did not stay awake discussing hospital bills after midnight. Yet there he stood, completely serious. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a new message. Another hospital notification. My stomach tightened immediately. I opened it expecting another bill. Instead, I found a notice from Noah's doctor requesting an urgent meeting the following afternoon. And suddenly, for the first time in months, I was more afraid of what I did not know than what I did. The next afternoon felt longer than the previous 2 years combined. Every minute dragged. Every email blurred together. Every conversation around me sounded distant, as if I were listening through a wall. The meeting with Noah's doctor was scheduled for 4 o'clock, and by 3:30, I could barely focus on the spreadsheet open in front of me. My hands trembled each time my phone lit up. I kept expecting bad news. That was the problem with hospitals. Even when things improved, fear never completely left. It simply waited. At 3:45, I shut down my computer and gathered my things. As I stood, my supervisor appeared beside my desk. "Olivia, before you leave, I need the quarterly reconciliation finished tonight." My stomach dropped. Tonight. The board review was moved up. I glanced toward the clock. Missing the hospital meeting was not an option. No one needed me there. "I have an appointment." He frowned immediately. "This cannot wait." The familiar guilt settled into my chest. For years I had been balancing impossible choices. Work or family, bills or sleep, responsibility or survival. There was never enough time for all of it. Before I could respond, another voice entered the conversation. "Actually, it can." Both of us turned. Ethan Blackwood stood several feet away. I had not even noticed him walking across the floor. Conversations around the office seemed to stop instantly. My supervisor straightened. "Mr. Blackwood." Ethan's expression remained calm. "Miss Parker has somewhere she needs to be." My supervisor hesitated. "The report will still exist tomorrow." The discussion ended immediately. Ethan continued walking without another word. He did not look back. He did not wait for gratitude. Yet somehow the pressure crushing my chest eased. 40 minutes later, I sat beside Noah in a consultation room at the hospital. He swung his legs beneath the chair while pretending not to be nervous. The doctor entered carrying a tablet and several folders. My pulse accelerated immediately. Then she smiled. Not a polite smile. A genuine one. "I have good news." The words barely felt real. She explained the latest test results. Noah's recovery was progressing faster than expected. The treatment plan was working. His future looked brighter than anyone had predicted 6 months earlier. I stared at the doctor, afraid I had misunderstood. "You mean?" My voice failed. She nodded. "He still has a journey ahead of him, but today is a very good day." Noah grinned so widely I thought his face might split in half. Relief hit me so hard my eyes filled with tears. For the first time in years, they were not tears of fear. After the meeting, Noah insisted on celebrating with hospital cafeteria cookies. They were terrible. We ate them anyway. As evening settled outside the windows, my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number appeared. For a moment, I almost ignored it. Then I opened it. One sentence filled the screen. "I hope the meeting brought good news. Take tomorrow off. Spend time with your brother, Ethan." I stared at the message for several seconds. Then I looked across the table at Noah laughing over a broken cookie. Somehow, without realizing it, the loneliest fight of my life no longer felt like a fight I was facing completely alone. The following Monday, I walked into the office expecting everything to return to normal. I should have known better. Normal had quietly disappeared the night I fell asleep in Ethan Blackwood's suite. The morning began like any other. Phones rang. Elevators opened and closed. Coffee cups appeared on desks. Yet something felt different. People kept glancing in my direction. Not openly, just enough to make me notice. By lunchtime, I understood why. A company-wide email announced a restructuring project within the accounting division. Several employees would be reassigned. Others would undergo performance reviews. Normally, that would not have concerned me. But by 2 o'clock, rumors had already spread across the floor. Somebody had made a costly reporting mistake during the previous quarter. Management was looking for someone to blame. I tried to ignore the whispers and focus on work. Then my supervisor appeared beside my desk. "Conference room B. Now." Every conversation around me seemed to stop. My stomach tightened immediately. Inside the conference room sat 3 managers and a stack of printed reports. The atmosphere felt colder than the air conditioning. One of the managers slid a document toward me. "Can you explain these discrepancies?" I stared at the pages. My pulse accelerated. I recognized the project immediately. The problem was that I had never approved those figures. Several entries had been altered after submission. "These are not my numbers," I said carefully. The room remained silent. Another manager folded his arms. "Your name is attached to the file." Confusion gave way to disbelief. Someone had changed the report. Someone had used my credentials. Yet the evidence pointed directly at me. For the next 30 minutes, questions came from every direction. I answered honestly, calmly, but with each passing minute, I could feel the conclusion forming before anyone said it aloud. They needed a responsible party, and I was sitting in the chair. By the time the meeting ended, exhaustion had returned with full force. I stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall. For a moment, I simply closed my eyes. Maybe this was how everything finally collapsed. The job, the income, the fragile balance keeping Noah and me afloat. "Miss Parker." I opened my eyes. Ethan stood a few feet away. He must have seen the expression on my face because his own changed immediately. "What happened?" I wanted to say nothing. I wanted to pretend everything was fine. Instead, I handed him the report. He scanned the pages quickly. Then he looked at me. "You did not do this." It was not a question. The certainty in his voice caught me off guard. "The evidence says otherwise." Ethan turned another page. His jaw tightened slightly. "No, the evidence says someone wanted it to look otherwise." For the first time that day, a small spark of hope appeared. Then Ethan noticed something near the bottom of the report. A timestamp. A user access log. His expression sharpened instantly. He looked up at me. And in that moment, I realized he had just found something everyone else had missed. My eyes followed Ethan back into the conference room. The managers were still gathered around the table, reviewing paperwork they clearly believed settled the matter. Ethan placed the report in front of them and pointed to a small section near the bottom of the page. "Explain this timestamp." The room fell quiet. One manager adjusted his glasses and leaned closer. Another frowned immediately. I watched confusion spread across their faces. Ethan remained perfectly calm. The report modifications were made at 11:18 p.m. on a Saturday. Nobody spoke. Ethan continued. "Miss Parker's security badge shows she left the building at 6:07 p.m. that evening." My pulse quickened. I remembered that Saturday. Noah had a follow-up appointment. I had left work early to take him to the hospital. Ethan slid another document across the table. The login credentials were hers. The physical access records were not. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed. Questions turned in a new direction. Screens were checked. Additional logs were requested. Within minutes, another employee's account activity appeared on the monitor. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had come before. Somebody else had accessed the system after hours. Somebody else had altered the files. And somebody else had allowed me to take the blame. By late afternoon, the truth had become impossible to ignore. The investigation revealed a series of unauthorized changes connected to a senior employee who had been quietly shifting responsibility away from several mistakes. My name had simply been the easiest target. I sat in the break room afterwards staring at a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Relief should have made me feel lighter. Instead, exhaustion settled deeper into my bones. The emotional weight of nearly losing everything had finally caught up with me. A chair scraped softly across the floor. Ethan sat across from me. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Sunlight stretched through the windows, painting long shadows across the room. "You should be angry," he said. I looked down at my hands. "I am tired." The answer surprised both of us. Ethan studied me carefully. Then he nodded as though he understood. "That too." I laughed quietly. It was the first genuine laugh I had managed all week. "Thank you." He looked almost uncomfortable hearing the words. "For what?" "For believing me when nobody else did." His gaze drifted toward the window. That was not difficult. Something about the simplicity of the statement tightened my throat. For so long I had grown accustomed to carrying every burden alone that simple support felt extraordinary. My phone buzzed. A message from Noah appeared on the screen. He had attached a photograph of himself holding a certificate from a school science competition. First place. I smiled immediately. Ethan noticed. "Good news." I turned the phone toward him. He looked at the picture, and something softened in his expression. He looks proud. He is. I paused. He wants to be an engineer. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Then he surprised me again. I would like to meet him someday. For a moment, I simply stared at him. The powerful executive sitting across from me sounded completely sincere. And as sunlight filled the room and the weight of the last few weeks slowly lifted from my shoulders, I realized the man I had once feared most inside this building had quietly become the person I trusted most. 6 months later, life looked completely different from the version I had once believed was inevitable. Some mornings I still woke up expecting another crisis, another overdue bill, another phone call from the hospital, another impossible choice waiting at the edge of the day. But those mornings came less often now. Noah was back in school full-time. His energy had returned. His grades were better than ever. Most evenings he filled our apartment with stories about science projects, engineering ideas, and plans for a future he no longer feared might disappear. Watching him dream again felt like a miracle I would never stop appreciating. Work had changed too. The investigation cleared my record completely, and a few weeks later I accepted a promotion I never would have imagined receiving. For the first time in years, I was not constantly running. I was still working hard, still studying, still building a future. But I was no longer surviving minute by minute. I was finally moving forward. One Friday afternoon, Noah convinced me to attend a charity event sponsored by Blackwood International. The company had launched a new scholarship initiative supporting students facing medical and financial hardships. When I arrived, I immediately recognized Ethan standing near the stage speaking with several donors. The room seemed to orbit around him, yet he looked exactly the same as the night I met him. Calm, confident, focused. Then he spotted us. A genuine smile appeared on his face. Noah waved enthusiastically. Ethan walked over and shook his hand like he was greeting an important executive rather than a 14-year-old student. Within minutes, they were discussing engineering, design software, and bridge construction. I stood nearby listening to them laugh together. It struck me then how strange life could be. The man I once viewed as untouchable now felt like someone I genuinely knew. Later that evening, after the event ended and guests began leaving, I stepped onto a quiet terrace overlooking the city. The skyline glowed beneath the fading colors of sunset. Ethan joined me a few moments later. Neither of us spoke immediately. We simply stood there watching the lights appear across Manhattan. "You look happier," he said. I smiled. "I am." The answer came easily because it was true. He nodded once, satisfied. "Good." A comfortable silence settled between us. Not empty, peaceful, the kind built through trust rather than words. I looked out across the city and thought about everything that had happened. One exhausted decision, one unexpected encounter, one